Hey guys, Invisible Kid here. Welcome back for another video. Today, we're going to be talking about one of my favorite artists of all time, an artist who I listened to death last year when I really got into them and really like. We are going to be ranking the studio albums of Megadeth. Now, before we start, I'm going to put in a few rules. I'm only counting studio albums. I'm not counting any EPs, live albums, or compilations because there's no real point in comparing them to studio albums. They completely different. So I'm not counting things like Hidden Treasures or Anthology Set the World on Fire. By counting the 15 studio albums that they've released across their career now. I will just say that my ranking is going to be very different from what a lot of people's rankings are. Some of the albums that they might put towards the that most people would put towards the bottom are more to the top, and some albums that are more towards the top are close to the bottom. But generally, I do agree with most Megadeth fans about what the good albums and bad albums are, and I think that's the important stuff. And I will also tell you, there are only 3 albums that they have done in their entire discography that I think are flawed, and only 2 of those albums are ones that I actually don't really care about. So, yeah, let's rank the Megadeth studio albums. Now, kicking off the list is an album that not everyone ranks as their least favorite Megadeth album. Some people think that 1999's Risk is worse than it, but I've never really seen it get higher than the bottom 3, so it won't be much of a surprise. At the bottom of the list, we're going with 2013's Super Collider. Now, what makes this one different from Risk is the fact that Risk felt it had a certain intriguing charm to it. Like it was them really experimenting with other things, like adding, like kind of innovating themselves to sound a bit more commercial. And I know a lot of people didn't like that, but but it's not a poorly written album. Like the songs still feel solid, well written, decently polished off. But most of what you're gonna find on this album is them just stripping everything down to hard rock absolute basics, that's and for a band like Megadeth, that's never going to be a good thing. The writing on this album is terrible. Just like the songs are really poorly written. Lines use about 5 syllables off a lot of the time. Really simple guitar. It's barely any guitar solos, which isn't very good. And Dave Mustaine's lyrics are absolutely atrocious on most of the songs. Now, don't get me wrong, there are some good things on the album, like the Super Collider title track, I think is very good. I know a lot of people don't like it, but I personally really like it. Kingmaker is quite a beast of an album opener, but it's not very. Here's another writing problem: is that Kingmaker's not original. It infamously sounds way too similar to Black Sabbath's Children of the Grave. And Forget to Remember is pretty good. Dance in the Rain is okay. And then there's a cover of Thin Lizzy's Cold Sweat, but that's a cover of a song by another band, and so they just wrote 10 songs, and then that was just a cover they threw on the end. So there's some good things about this album, but then there are tracks like Built for War, which I know songs like Moto Psycho and Fastlane and Wrecker are songs that a lot of Megadeth fans think exist as jokes and will often be hated and laughed at for being kind of goofy and trying to have some fun and, oh, look at me, I'm so fast and stuff like that. But Built for War is my pick as the worst Megadeth song ever, and Off the Edge and Beginning of Sorrow coming really close behind it. Like, so there are some good songs on it, but some really bad ones. And yeah, Super Collider is a pretty terrible album in my opinion. Now, number 14, we are going to go with the terrible attempt to return to their roots. So number 14 is 2001's The World Needs a Hero. Now, this isn't a terrible album. I think it's decent. The lyrics and writing of it are decent enough. But the biggest problem I have with this album is that, you see, it came 2 years after Risk, which caused a lot of uproar due to not being very heavy and just them trying to be even more commercial than cryptic writings. Now, this was an attempt to return to their roots, which means become a thrash band again. Now, um, in all honesty, I think the album itself is okay, but it is a terrible attempt to return to their roots. It is, in my opinion, Megadeth's least energetic album. A lot of it just sounds bland, kind of repetitive. The lyrics are frustrated at times. There's a fair bit of spoken word on some of the songs. There's not a lot of energy. Like, for example, Disconnect is probably the slowest and most dragging album opener in their catalog, and the title track is the worst title track of any Megadeth album. And so there are some good things about it. For me, the standout track is definitely 1000 Times Goodbye. That's a really good song. The leading song is Dread and the Fugitive Mind, which is pretty good, though a kind of. It was essentially just an attempt to recreate Sweating Bullets, and it's nowhere near as good as the original song. And When is a pretty good album closer, but then it does kind of highlight them trying to return to their roots by going back and taking elements of those songs and just putting them in and saying, "Oh, look, yeah, we've got these elements in it, so it's a thrash album." Like, When is kind of suffers from literally just being a carbon copy of Diamond Head's Am I Evil, but it's still a good song. So, The World Needs a Hero. It's all right, but it was not a good attempt to return to their roots. There's not a lot of energy or thrashy stuff on here. The most energetic song is the infamous Moto Psycho. Personally, I think it's a very fine tune. And love it or hate it, you've got to admit it's one of the more memorable tracks on an album that is otherwise kind of forgettable and just there and kind of boring. Right, number 13 is an album that I know a lot of people actually really like. Some people even think it's their best album of the 21st century. If it is, then sure, but I don't really understand why you'd think your decision. And I cannot, you cannot convince me that United Abominations is anywhere near as good as stuff like Endgame or Dystopia. Now, don't get me wrong. There's a lot of good stuff on United Abominations. It did spawn the classic "Washington Is Next." That's a really fantastic song. And "Sleepwalkers" a great song. The first four songs, so those two along with "Never Walk Alone," "A Call to Arms," and the title track, I think are all very fine tunes, but then it kind of suffers from. It starts off really strong with the first four songs and then just goes like does that in terms of the quality of the songs. There's plenty of energy on this album, but the thing is, it rapidly runs out of memorable songs. Like, not to say that the songs past the first four are bad. Um, like Blessed Are the Dead, I think is a pretty fine track. For me, one of the best things on this album is I know a lot of people hate it because it's a redux of an old song um, just with Christina Scabia from Lacuna Coil on as an assistant vocalist, and it's slightly faster and slightly heavier. But for me, the Atulamon Set Me Free, Set Me Free track is actually one of the more memorable things on this album, and one of the things on this album, and one of the songs on this album that I would listen to. Like, other than those 5 tracks, there's not really a lot of good stuff going on, though I will point out that the remastered version of the album um, came with a bonus track, which is a cover of Led Zeppelin's Out on the Tiles, and that's a pretty fine tune as well, but the remastered version barely changes. So United Abominations, it's an album I have a lot of respect for. I respect it for what it is. It's very good, but in my opinion, it could have been much better than it actually was. Now, this is where the difference between my album ranking and most people's would come in. Number 12, we have their first album, Killing Is My Business, and Business Is Good. Now, I know 12 is a bit low on this list, but I do not think there's anything wrong with this album. This album, it's known for At the Start. I haven't heard the original version. I probably won't. It's known for sounding quite muddy and not having a good sound, but they have remixed the album since, which is great. I don't think there's anything wrong with their first album. It was a pretty strong first effort. Last Rites Love to Death and Mechanics are the 2 songs on this album that I really like. Skull Beneath the Skin and Chosen Ones, I think, are very good. The title track's good. A really raw thrashing album, and while while those first 4 albums are like Megadeth, thrashy, and angry albums. This one actually does have a certain raw and fury feel that the others don't. Really, it's definitely the most raw sounding of them all. I guess maybe the most awkward track on the album is the cover / parody of Nancy Pelosi. Oh, damn it, I almost said Nancy Pelosi. I've been watching way too much Cartoon President. Nancy Sinatra, Frank Sinatra's daughter, completely different person. Um, so yeah, their parody of her song "These Boots," which I think is actually quite fun, though I do understand why others may find it awkward. So, Killing Is My Business, and Business Is Good. I do like it. It's a good debut album, got lots of really raw, thrashing stuff, and it could only really get better from there. Right, I'm just trying to get the next one up. Right, so coming in at number 12 is another one of their 80s albums. So Far, So Good, So What from 1988. Again, I think the reason I'm ranking these 80s albums a bit lower on the list, it has nothing to do with me disliking them. I do not dislike them at all. I don't think there is anything wrong with them. Lots of really great stuff. The thing is that I don't really have the nostalgia that most fans do. For me, the albums that I would have grown up with are United Abominations, Endgame, and all the albums released after that, which does unfortunately include Super Collider, but we won't talk about that one anymore. But yeah, and in fact, last year when I was listening to all these Megadeth albums and really getting into them, I barely listened to the 80s ones. Like, from Rust in Peace and then Forward, those are the ones that I was really listening to and really getting into and really liked. The 80s ones, not so much, but very fine studio albums. For me, on this one, my top 3 songs are definitely the last 3. In My Darkest Hour is a fantastic tune. Definitely a great lead singer from this album. Hook in Mouth's good. Lie's pretty good. It's one of their more punk sounding albums, and they made it even more punkier by adding a cover of Sex Pistols' Anarchy in the UK, which is pretty good. Yeah, very thrashy Megadeth album. Lots of great stuff. One of the more fun ones, in my opinion. Right, now my favorite one from the 80s is everyone's favorite one. I Can Already Feel the Heat like what Peace Sells is only at number 10 and isn't in the top 5, but yeah, Peace Sells, but who's buying? Um, the But the MP sells produce buying. Very good. I like it. It's a very fine album. Got lots of really great stuff. Wake Up Dead's fantastic album opener. The title the title track was the first song on this album that I really got into. It's the one that was really for me. I feel I really like the title track of this album. And it is one of Megadeth's fan favorites. Good Morning Black Friday is also good. Really great thrashy album, very strong sophomore effort. If you become a thrash metal artist or any kind of artist in the future, something like this is probably what you want, not something like Bon Jovi's 7,800 degrees Fahrenheit. But at some point, I will rank the Bon Jovi studio albums. That'll probably be later this year. But yeah, that not that there's anything wrong with that album, but let's not talk about Bon Jovi. Let's just talk about Megadeth. My Last Words is a fine track as well. A lot of really fine stuff in this album. I guess it's just not really for me the way some of these other albums are. I must confess, the first time I listened to Peace Cells, I didn't really care for it. I was really new to the way these songs are struck. Some of these songs are structured. They're not just really ordinarily structured rock songs, but a bit more complex. But yeah, really, really great album piece, though. I like it. Right, number 9, we have The System Has Failed from 2004. Now, this was essentially a Dave Mustaine solo album because Megadeth had essentially disbanded a couple of years prior due to Dave Mustaine's arm injury after the world needs a hero. But yeah, after a couple of less than successful albums, Risk being the commercial attempt and the world needs a hero being the terrible return to their roots attempt, I think the system has failed is really what they needed to get the spark going again and make a great comeback. If I know one guy was saying, I watched on YouTube, I can't remember his name. He was saying normally when people think of Megadeth returning to their roots, they think of the World Needs Hero. I will confess, I couldn't disagree with him more. I think the one that I think this is Megadeth returning to their roots and becoming a thrash band again. It is the weirdest Megadeth album again. I don't really know what it is about. I think it might be the way they're producing it and recording the sound. They might be trying to make it sound a bit more 21st century, using lots of synthesizers, kind of like Iron Maiden's Somewhere in Time album, which was their first album to use synthesizers. I think this might have been a Megadeth album that used lots of synthesizers. But yeah, it's a really good, lots of energy, thrashiness. It is the first album, in my opinion. Like, you know how back when Megadeth first started, like, you got thrash albums like Peace Cells and Rust in Peace, and the Peace albums essentially. And then you got the more refined moments like Cryptic Writings and Euthanasia. And nowadays, most Megadeth albums are just a mix of all of them. I think this was the first album. Well, The World Needs a Hero, but yeah, I think this was the first album that was essentially just a mix of all of them. Got like there are some more refined songs like The Scorpion. The Scorpion's probably my favorite song on this album, and then you've got more thrashy ones like Back in the Day. That's a very fine track. And Kick the Chair. That's definitely a major standout to this album, and definitely a song that needed to happen after years of kind of being a bit more mainstream. But yeah, The System Has Failed. Really fantastic album. Great comeback. I think is really what they needed after the world needs a hero. And my only problem with this album is the last two tracks, which are Shadow of Death and My Kingdom, are probably the weakest conclusions to a Megadeth album, so not really great closing tracks, but other than that, I think The System Has Failed is a really great album and a really great comeback for them. Number 8, we have another 21st Century album that has definitely gained quite a lot of high praise for good reasons. It is 2009's Endgame album. Now, this is a really well done album, in my opinion. I think this is probably the first album since like Countdown to Extinction or Rust in Peace, where it felt like everything was just planned out to go the way it was and just be really awesome technical metal album. The one I can most closely compare it to is Master of Puppets by Metallica. Just really, even though the songs are simply structured, really technical, well planned out, flowing, heavy thrash metal album. Lots of really thrashy stuff on here. Dialectic Chaos is a good instrumental opener which flows into This Day We Fight. I really like the Lord of the Rings theme on that song. Head Crush is a fantastic song. So yeah, a lot of really hard pounding, heavy thrash metal on this album, which is really good. Chris Boderick, who's on guitar, he's doing a great job. Lots of great guitar solos. Dave Mustaine's vocals are really strong. Probably their strongest point of the 21st century. I know then the 3 albums that they did after it sounded angry, kind of more growly like, but on this one, it sounded really just powerful. He's shouting, which is really great to hear. My favorite song from this album is definitely the title track. Um, but the last 3 songs are fantastic. I think it did what um, the system has failed, and also United Abominations didn't do so well, which is having weak album closes. I think How the Story Ends and The Right to Go Insane, and of course Head Crusher are fantastic ways to close this album. So yeah, number 8, Endgame. Number 7, we have another one of their attempts at commercial success. This is their first one from the 90s. I'm a big fan of 1990s Megadeth. I love all the albums they did in the 90s. Now, while this is my least favorite, oh, damn it, Cryptic Writings from 1997, it's still a really great album. I think it's probably Megadeth's equivalent of Iron Maiden's Fear of the Dark album. Well, they don't sound anything alike. There's no similarity between them, but that makes sense because they're completely different bands. Like an album that's primarily celebrated for one song, but not really the rest of the album. Now, I think obviously the song from that Iron Maiden album would be the title track, which is actually my favorite Iron Maiden song, Fear of the Dark. But there are lots of other really good songs on the album as well. But I think in terms of the rest of the album, Cryptic Writings is a bit better. It's primarily celebrated for the classics Trust and She-Wolf, and I do agree that those are the best songs on the album, and also the single Almost Honest is good as well. But I actually love every song on this album, except maybe Mastermind, but every song on this album has its own certain charm to it. There's lots of really catchy songs, like I'll Get Even, Secret Place is a great song, and Sin as well, quite an underrated Megadeth number. I like the really Faith No More kind of funky sound of Have Cool Will Travel, really. Uh, I love the snare drums, the way the drums and guitars are going off, and also about violence in schools. But this album actually does have a few thrashy songs like Disintegrators, Vortex, and also really great album closer at and criminally underrated Megadeth song. I'm surprised that no one talks about this FFF as being the best thrashy song from Cryptic Writings. I really like that one. Really, lots of menacing power on it about with political lyrics. Great song, great thrashy song. Really, yeah, I like it. I love this album. I love Cryptic Writings. It's a really great album. Trust is a great song. Like, I think all the songs on this album are great. I'm a big fan of it, and it's quite underappreciated by a lot of Megadeth fans. Now, number 6, we have 1994's Euthanasia album. Some people rank it a bit higher, some people rank it a bit lower. It's number 6 for me. Just not quite getting into the top 5, but it is a really great album. I think this was probably the high point for Dave Mustaine's voice. I think the best thing about this album is it's them trying to be more commercial, mainstream, and refined, but it's also extremely heavy. Like the guitars blaring, drums hitting real hard. Dave Mustaine's voice is, again, like I said, I think it was at its best on this album. It sounds really strong. Um, But yeah, lots of great stuff. It had the classic "Tout le Monde," that's a great song. "Addicted to Chaos" as well. "Reckoning Day" is a killer album opener. And I also like the funky "Train of Consequences," which I groove to quite often whenever I put it on. Really catchy, that one. And also one of my favorite songs, "Victory." Like, I immediately fell in love with that song when I listened to it. I love the whole, like, naming all those different songs while still maintaining a, while still maintaining a certain theme. I was immediately hooked on that one. I really like that song. I guess there is a bit of flack in the middle of this album, which is why some people complain about it. My least favorite song on this album is probably the title track, but lots of really catchy songs on here, like "Killing Road" and what's another one? "Killing Road" and "Black Curtains" as well. I think it's a good song, and the semi-power ballad "I Thought I Knew It All" is good as well. So yeah, "Euthanasia," a really fantastic album. I guess the thing that brings it down is there's a bit of weaker stuff, but I don't think there are no bad songs on this album. I really do like it. Number 5, we have their blockbuster, "Countdown to Extinction." Now, this is a really solid and well put together album, even though it was kind of being more commercial. Like, it was still received well by fans. I think it is actually another one of the more fun and less serious Megadeth albums, with songs like "Skin of My Teeth," and that's a great album opener, and also "High Speed Dirt" as well. Of course, the legendary "Symphony of Destruction," which anyone can agree is probably Megadeth's most famous song, and it's a great one. I sway to it when I listen to it. Really good. I think the good thing about this album is, even if you're sick of "Symphony of Destruction," it's not just about "Symphony of Destruction." You've got "Architecture of Aggression's" a really great song. Title track's good. "Captive Honor" is one of my favorites. Whereas I do love the acoustic intro and then the really intense build up. I love its political lyrics, and "Ashes in Your Mouth." I do not know if they've done a better album closer than it. Real killer song, killer guitar solo. Like, I think this is one of the. I think they really planned this album out really well. It's a really fantastic album in my opinion. So yeah, number 5's got "Countdown to Extinction." Now we're getting into the top 4, and I love all these albums pretty much equally. I love most of the Megadeth albums within the top 10/top 9. I do love quite equally. And when we get into the top 3, there's very little separating them. But number 4, we have the one that most people consider the best, "Rust in Peace." This one is definitely the most complex of them all, but it didn't take long for me to fall in love with this album. Really great. Holy Wars is a wonderful tune, and Hangar 18 as well, and Tornado of Souls. Any album that has those three songs on it, I think, is kind of destined to be good. I do love Rust in Peace Polaris, or Polaris, however you pronounce it. I think that's a really great album closer, and title track. Lots of really thrashy, complex, structured songs. Most of the songs on this album don't have choruses, and that's fine. Lots of awesome guitar solos. I think that this was the first album with Marty Friedman, who many people think consider the best guitarist that Megadeth has had. Um, yeah, I really like this album. It's great. Definitely can see why people rank it high, and lots of people it's number one. But I think the next few albums kind of take that spot a bit better than this one could, just because of what they meant to me when I first listened to them. So let's get into that. Now, I think this one is going to cause quite a lot of outrage and is going to be by far the biggest shock of the list. Number three, we have an album that I've mentioned a couple of times but haven't ranked yet. But I won't put it in the top two. I will stop torturing you guys. Yeah, number three is Rick from 1999. Now, I know this is a very controversial album. A lot of people don't like it because the songs don't sound like they belong in the Megadeth catalog, and that's okay. I do understand why be disappointed by an album because it's trying to sound more commercial and it's not Rusty and it's not Rusty. In fact, there are times I listen to it and think about it and can't actually believe it's a Megadeth album. But I will also say to you, if you're not happy with it because it's them trying to be more commercial and the songs don't sound like they belong on a Megadeth album, and you don't like it as a result and think they did a terrible job in it because of it, I will say tough. Like Megadeth or any artist, they owe the rights to their creativity. They can do whatever they want. You cannot limit their creativity just because the songs don't sound like they belong in the Megadeth catalog. But the thing about this album is the song quality is brilliant. Like Super Collider, I will admit, like none of like the writing's terrible on that one. But the thing is, the writing quality on this album is not bad. Like the lyrics are pretty good. There's still good guitar work, definitely better than Super Collider. It's not them being absolutely basic. It still feels very well built, and it still feels very layered. Like I mean, there are a few sound effects brought in. But the thing is, there is a lot of energy on this album. Like I mean, Insomnia, which is the opener, I quite quickly fell in love with it for the insomnia, thing. That's fantastic. And to me, it's a Megadeth thrash song with keyboards in it. Like literally, it's very fast paced. Please listen to it and listen to it. Seven is probably the heaviest song. This album really catchy. I do groove to it quite often. Prince of Darkness is a really thumping, menacing tune, and I can definitely see why people love it. I groove to Crushin', I'll admit as well, and Breadline's a fine tune as well. And what was actually my favorite Megadeth song when I first heard it, Wanderlust, a really awesome song. It's got a great energy build up, great guitar solo, and then it comes back into the killer chorus that it has. I think there are no bad songs on this album. And Time the Beginning and End are pretty good as well. Like there's nothing wrong with this album. It is completely flawless. It's like all the songs on it are great, and I know a lot of people are going to be getting really angry with me for saying that, but that's just what I feel. Sadly, because Megadeth fans weren't happy with it for not sounding like but because the songs didn't sound like they belonged in Megadeth's catalog, they dissed it, thought it was a risk that they shouldn't have taken, and hated it, and have often ranked it as their least favorite Megadeth album, which is a shame. If they were a bit less rigid, then I think a lot more people would enjoy this album. But yeah, I love Risk. It's a great album, and maybe listen to it with an open mind, just kind of ignoring the fact that it says Megadeth on the front, and you might actually find you like. Right, and number one and two aren't separated by much. They're not exactly interchangeable, but I love both of these albums. And they're both from the 2010s. They're the two albums that came before and after Super Collider, oddly enough. But number two, we have 2016's Dystopia. Now, while I wasn't really into Megadeth for the release of any of their albums, because I was really getting into them last year. Um, but I think listening to Super Collider and like just going, and oh god, and how bad most of the songs on it, and then getting to this is what is probably a wonderful experience. Like, The World Needs a Hero was a terrible attempt to make a comeback. It did not work. Yeah, I think like The World Needs a Hero kind of suffered. I think the biggest problem with it was that it felt really forced and really desperate, and that just didn't work. But if you want to make a return to form and a return to their roots, you want this. This is what's gonna work. Like, there is absolutely no similarity between Super Collider and this. Like, this is such a dramatic turn. It's like, wow. Like, you wouldn't even believe that the same band did it. I think you could get away with convincing someone that they're by completely different bands. Like, there's no similarity. But let's get more into it. Like, really dark, heavy, thrashy, ferocious album. It's again a mix of all of them. There's some more thrashy songs and some more refined songs, but well, that's good. But that's okay. And it is put together unbelievably well. Like, I think this is their most well planned out album ever. I think they sat down and were like, right, how do we make an album that the fans are gonna love, and just isn't so desperate and forced as The World Needs a Hero? And they got Dystopia. Like, it's not really them trying to be anything. It's not them trying to return to their roots. It's not trying to be radio friendly. It's just them doing it. It's just them doing it, and that's the best thing about it. Like, the thread is real. It's a killer album opener. Title track's great. Poisonous Shadows is one of my favorite Megadeth songs of all time. The Emperor is great, and the Emperor does definitely provide a bit more of a lighter and more brighter side of life to this album. Like, this album is, in my opinion, the darkest and angriest album they have ever done. I know that's an arguable thing to say, but I do not think they have done an album that is angrier or darker than Dystopia. Like, there is no light at the end of the tunnel on this album. I mean, sure, there are more lighter-hearted tunes that are show a bright side of life, but this is them living in a trash world, like unhappy with everything, and just as it goes towards the end of the album, accepting it and becoming okay with it. This is just such an angry, ferocious album, and I love it. It's beautiful. I think the reason that it's a 9.8 out of 10, not a 10 out of 10, which is the number one pick on this album is, I think that's because of Foreign Policy. Now, Foreign Policy is also a cover of a song from another band. I don't remember which one it was, but and it's okay, but it doesn't make a really good album closer. Fortunately, however, on Spotify there is a Spotify bonus track that is the album's closer, and that is a cover of the Welsh band Budgie's song "Melt the Ice Away." And please get Spotify and listen to it on that, because oh boy, does that make a better album closer than this one does. Really thrashy, heavy cover of the song, completely different from the original version, but that's all right. It makes a great album closer. I think this album would have been perfect if they had just if they had he had made that the album closer on the end, or even just omitted Foreign Policy entirely and put that as track number 11. I think that would have made this album truly superb and truly perfect. But yeah, that's the only flaw I've got with this album. Dystopia is a fantastic way to return to form after the dreadful Super Collider. Really made a difference, and it makes such an improvement. It's just an ice melt away from absolute perfection. Now, I know a lot of people are going to think it's strange that the one album I haven't named yet is 2011 13. One that I think it's an album that its reception was kind of mixed. Some people really liked it, some people didn't like it so much. But I think everyone managed to find something to like about it. But yes, 13 from 2011 is definitely my favorite Megadeth album. Like, you see, I mean, the thing is the whole. I've always really liked the idea, like, it's called 13, and it's got the numbers 1 and 3 in it. There are 13 songs, and the last one's called 13, and it was their 13th album. And in fact, I listened to it the first year, the year I told 13, I the year I turned 13, yeah. And I immediately became attached to this one. It is just so awesome to me. To me, just like it's like while it doesn't feel as planned out the way Dystopia does, like I think that the way they wrote all the songs on this album, it is like every song on this album is great. Like I liked every song on this album, and I still do really. Like it's wonderful. Wonderful. Sudden Death is a really good album opener. Really great guitar solos in it, even though it is kind of repetitive. Public Enemy #1 was one of my favorites. It was the music video they did. It has a music video of a terrorist monkey, which is pretty funny. The title track album closer is really good. Could be my favorite Megadeth song. Well, not my favorite Megadeth song. Like, it also has another one of Megadeth's infamous fun songs, Fast Lane. A lot of people make fun of it because it's like it's hilarious and the lyrics are kind of dumb, but it's definitely better than Built for War, which was Built for War is just Megadeth. Dave Mustaine shouting it up to the prime of some big robot. Like, what do you think your fists are for? It is like, listen to it. It's completely ridiculous. But Fastlane, it's got a real charm. It's got a real freedom to it, and it's also got Black Swan for crying out loud. Like the guitar solo intro to that is truly amazing. Like that actually could be my favorite Megadeth song. That's it's difficult to figure out since Megadeth has so many great songs from 15 albums, but Black Swan is a killer. It's a beast of a song, and it was originally recorded for United Abominations, but then got replaced. If I'm honest with you, I don't really want Black Swan to be on United Abominations. I think it actually works real much better on 13 than it would on United Abominations, and I think if it were on United Abominations, it wouldn't be nearly as memorable as it is on this album. Like, every song on this album is just fantastic. I could name all of them, but killer songs. Just like 13 is for what it meant to me when I first listened to it, and for what it is, I think is my favorite Megadeth album. I played it to death. I listened to it all the time because of how much I loved it. And I think it is like, I think, mate, a lot of people thought it was a step down from Endgame, but I think that was kind of what it was meant to be. Like, Endgame was meant to be the real, like, technical, real, like, just well planned out one, going back to something like Rust in Peace or one of those or one of those types of albums. But I think 13 was more of a cross between Killing Is My Business and Countdown to Extinction. It's them wanting to sound a bit more refined, mainstream appropriate, but also quite fast and thrashy and old school, like have a certain freedom to it. There is a certain freedom feel on this album that I don't think that some of the other albums don't really have. And like old school, thrashy and fun, like go back to like try and replicate old times and the old days where that was appropriate, and it really worked for it. For an older audience, it might not be that great, but for a younger audience like myself, it's something truly fantastic. It's my favorite Megadeth album. If you agree with me, please leave your thoughts in the comments below. But yeah, sorry for how long this video's turned out. I'm going into a lot of detail about why I love all these or hate all these Megadeth albums and what makes them special and why they're in the position that they are in. But yeah, on the list. But yeah, I think every Megadeth album, even Super Collider, does actually have good songs. Now, please let me know in the comments below how you would rank the albums. What your favorite and least favorite Megadeth songs are. I know I said my favorites like Black Swan and 13, and my least favorite's Built for War. Um, Let me know if you agree with this list or if you don't agree. I'd love to hear what you guys think. Also, remember to leave a like and subscribe to my channel. Thank you guys very much for watching. I'll see you guys later in another video. I hope in the next couple of days I'm going to upload the Tool cover on bass. You won't want to miss that. Yeah, I will see you guys in the next video. Goodbye.